You're listening to Under the Shell Podcast, the best in America.
Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Testudo Times. I'm Brendan Weissel.
Sam Jane.
And Michael House.
And Matt Spoke shaved his head, Julian Reese in the transfer portal, and many Maryland football players are also in the transfer portal. All that and more after our interview with Brett Nelligan. This week we are joined by Brett Nelligan, the head women's gymnastics coach here at the University of Maryland. Brett, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you as well. So let's look back at the past year. Obviously, you guys ended a couple weeks ago. You guys posted the best performance at an NCAA regional in Maryland program history. Is that something going into the season you thought would be possible?
So we look at the beginning of the year, we kind of look at the roster, look at the talent we had. And every year, a lot of teams do this where you have a word or a phrase or whatever that the year is kind of centered around. And believe it or not, the very beginning, first week of school, our word was breakthrough, right? And it was like, we kind of used it as a mantra all in the fall, in the preseason, of making little breakthroughs all season long, making breakthroughs in the gym, in the weight room, even outside of the gym and academics and things like that, that little breakthroughs can add up to big breakthroughs. And so believe it or not, maybe we didn't have the specific goal of, setting the Maryland all-time NCAA scoring record, but that's a breakthrough, right? We just knew that if we kept making these little breakthroughs, something big was going to happen at the end of the season.
So you're obviously in the off season now. You won't start up again for, until probably December or January and start competing. How does that kind of help you with momentum into transfer portal and also into the off season?
Yeah, it's great. And, it's funny that I know a lot of people think, this is like we take a little break, but that's not how gymnastics is. Gymnastics is a year round. We gave them a week off. And then the second week they had weight room and strength and conditioning. And then bam, we were right back in the gym on Monday of this week. So it's been exciting already to have them back in the gym. They're working new skills, training new combinations, trying to up our difficulty. But yeah, it gives us a lot of momentum. Like you said, being able to approach the portal after having such a great season, recruiting after having such a great season and a great final ranking. And plus, if you look at it, night one of that NCAA regional tournament, we were the only meet going. We were the only meet on TV. So there were a lot of eyeballs on us, and we got a lot of great feedback from fans, alum, and recruits as well. They're like, we watched your whole meet. You guys looked amazing. And then on night two, being in there with, the number one team in the country in LSU and number 9 Arkansas, again, that was the most watched regional meet of that round as well, the round of 32. So, and we did a phenomenal job. So having all those eyes on us, I think, is going to benefit us going forward. It's, I've already been on the phone with some recruits from the transfer portal, and it's like, oh yeah, I watched you guys at the regional competition. I want to be a part of a team like that.
You kind of mentioned it there, had the lone first round game on ESPN, played against number 1 LSU. Also this season, you guys had a program record crowd against UCLA. Just how big was that for the program as well?
It was huge. That's from the start when I took this job, that was the dream, it's funny, when I first became head coach, we used to compete in the pavilion, and first day on the job, I asked to meet with the athletic director at the time, and I asked for permission to slowly work our way out to the main court. And, I was graciously granted that opportunity to do, 3 out of 5 meets that first year. And then it became 4, and then 5 out of 5. And now we even do our red versus black out there. So the dream has always been to start filling that arena up, which is a tough task, as you know. But to come out into the arena and see over 7,000 fans attend a gymnastics meet was it's incredible. That's what I got into coaching for, is to have a incredible team like we have, and to do what we love to do in front of thousands of fans and little kids. And I'll tell you what, my favorite part of that night was that obviously coming to see Jordan Chiles is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and a lot of kids came out to see her. But when I walked in that arena, everyone was wearing red. So, no matter who you came to see, you were wearing Maryland red that night. And that made us really feel proud of of our program and knew that they came to support and cheer for us. Yes, seeing Jordan was great, but that Terp Nation came out to support their team.
You kind of mentioned it there about slowly holding more meets in the Xfinity Center as time's gone on. What are some other ways that you've seen your program kind of grow over? Now this was your 16th year in College Park, am I correct? Wow,
Yeah.
that's a big number. So since 2009, 16th year this year, kind of how have you seen this program change?
Yeah, it's step by step, and I was lucky to follow a legend, obviously, and the foundation that he built for the program set us up for success. But we just tried to build on that. Just try to take every aspect of the program, the way we train, the way we work out in the weight room, the way we market, the way we do our media, the way we do schoolwork, the way we do rehab and recovery. Just take all of it to the next level, like 1% better each year. And we're starting to feel like a program that is getting more visibility on the national stage. And like I said, just going toe to toe with some of the best teams in the country and really feeling like we belong. I'll tell you, after the meet, Jay Clark, the head coach at LSU and a good friend of mine, and first thing he did after the meet was come right up to me and he was like, "Man, you guys are good. Like, you were really close to us. Like, I can't, you've done a great job with this program." And I'm just thankful that we're gaining the recognition that they so rightly deserve, because they put in a tremendous amount of work in the gym, and we're just really proud of the way they're representing the University of Maryland.
I feel back thinking about what you just said about like the pavilion. I feel like it must have been super tight in there. You got to imagine that Xfinity Center is a much better space.
For sure. So like the equipment like barely fit. I mean, it was like so tight and really kind of dangerous was like my initial issue in there. And then, you were trying to sell the program to recruits. So we wanted the bells and whistles. We wanted the lights out and the video board and the strobes and like all the fun stuff that fans and recruits like. But we knew it would be a large task to move into the main court. But every year we've gotten better. Every year our attendance is going up. So I think it was the right decision, and I think it's enabled us to take our program to a new level. I mean, Xfinity is one of the premier venues in all of college athletics. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, it makes sense that they're would have as many events in there as they can. Let's go back now and kind of talk about your personal story with gymnastics. With your dad, I have to imagine you were training from, probably the day you were born. Is that right?
Yeah, training for gymnastics or training to be a coach?
Training for gymnastics.
Yeah, so I was a gymnast myself. He didn't actually coach me. I went to a gym kind of up the street in Columbia, Maryland. Really reputable like men's program. We've had a couple Olympians come from our team. And yep, I did gymnastics, and then I was recruited for college. I did college gymnastics at University of Massachusetts, where we were fortunate enough to win 2 conference championships. After my junior year, there was a tough financial time back then. I think it was like 2007 in 2001, and they ended up cutting 7 sports at Umass, including gymnastics, and it was tough because we were like number 6 or 7 in the country at the time. And so I had, it's kind of a funny story. I had wrist surgery, and now I returned to school and I wasn't an athlete anymore. So I was like, what do I do? So I called the diving coach. I just said, can I join the diving team? And she's like, well, have you ever dove before? I said, no, never. But I was a gymnast. Like, if you just let me join the team, I'll figure it out. And she was so gracious. She let me join the team. I was in a cast from, wrist to shoulder for like 3 months, and she let me come to practice every day and do my rehab. And the funny part is I got the cast off, I did my rehab, I got cleared, and I said, thank you so much, but I'm not a diver. I'm going to quit the team or whatever. And she said, in the nicest terms that I can say on a podcast here, she said, go put your little butt in that Speedo and get back out here, because you're going to dive. And I'm so grateful for her, because she forced me to kind of stick with it. And I dove for UMass my senior year. We won a conference championship. So I was able to win a conference championship in 2 different sports. And then leaving college, I wanted to continue my graduate work. Was choosing between law and MBA, and I had about 4 or 5 gymnastics schools offer me assistant coaching positions, but the opportunity to come back and help my father finish his career was one that I couldn't pass up. My mother was pretty influential too. She put the guilt trip on me that, you better come home. Don't go somewhere else. So I came here. I did my MBA, and I was just going to help my father finish. And whenever he wanted to be done, I was going to go get a real job, as we like to say. But then you just get hooked. Like, the recruiting was fun. We were getting a lot of talent coming in. We were starting to win more meets, and the rest is history, as they say, because I was just hooked at that point.
Was coaching always in your plans? I know you mentioned you had some other options, but was that something growing up, watching your father coach the Terps, was that something that you had envisioned yourself possibly doing in the future?
I would say no, like, not at all. Maybe subconsciously, and same on his part. Like, we used to talk all the time. The life of a coach is really tough. It's really tough on a family. It's really tough. I'm lucky that I come from a family of athletes. My mother was a collegiate gymnast. My father was a collegiate gymnast. My uncle was a bronze medalist in the Olympics. My aunt was a collegiate gymnast. Like, so we have that experience, but it's tough. And I remember my father always saying to me, like, if you have a chance, don't do what I'm doing. Don't do what I'm doing. Like, be a lawyer or be a doctor. Like, go make a ton of money, because I think back in his day, coaching was a passion project. There was certainly, no one was in it for the money. And when my father started here, I think he was making $2,000 a year salary in like 1979, and it wasn't even enough to raise a family on. So, but things are different now, right? Like, popularity of collegiate sports is booming. The popularity of women's athletics is booming. The popularity of gymnastics is in an all-time high. So it's different now, but I think his message to me was, to be successful. Shoot, am I frozen? Sorry. To be successful, you know, uh, in collegiate athletics, you really have to pour everything you got into it. You've got to make your program like a family, and growing up, my father, they didn't have a strong budget here back in the 80s. So, if he wanted the team to get a good meal the night before a meet, they came to our house and my mom cooked for them. Like, that's how that's how it was. And when you have a job that becomes part of your everyday life, it's a lot, and it takes a lot out of you. And to this day, he'll tell you he loved every minute of it, but I think he didn't want that for me. He wanted me to have a job that just made tons of money and that was a regular 9 to 5 that I could spend time with my kids. But I think subconsciously, though, he was always preparing me for this. He was always, he'd point things out to me. I remember coming to practice or at meets, I'd be always watching him, how he handles situations, what he'd say to the athletes. I found myself, when I watch football and basketball, I watch the press conferences. How do coaches handle great wins? How do they handle tough losses? So I always felt like I was drawn to that coaching side. So I think, no, it wasn't in the plans originally. No, my father didn't want me to do this, but I think he's happy for me now. And I think he kind of knows he was preparing me for this all along.
What would you say is like the biggest thing that you kind of observed from your father and now have taken into kind of your own coaching journey and your own coaching experience and the coach that you are today with the Terps? What would you say you've taken from him the most?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really easy answer. So my father was ahead of his time in like team culture. That word gets thrown around so much now, and like family, like the team is like a family. Like, I think it's very obvious now how we should treat student athletes, treat them, the holistic approach of making sure that they're finding success not just in the gym, but in life, in the classroom, emotionally, physically, mentally, that we're taking care of their needs at such a high level through the physical therapy and treatment, all that. And also having your student athletes be involved in the process of their future, right? Like, in the 70s and 80s, that was not common. Like, that's not how it worked, right? You think of like some of the greatest coaches you can think about in any sport. It was like drill sergeant stuff. It was like, you do what you're told, you don't ask questions. And my father, very early on in the 80s, like broke that mold of like, treat the student athletes as people first, get to know them, invest in them, invest in their future. And the returns will be tenfold because they'll go above and beyond for you. You know, they don't feel like that you're just, motivating them for the benefit of yourself or for the program. It's like for them too. So the relationship that we have with our student athletes today is due to the way my father kind of ran his team and his culture. And like I said, he was just clearly ahead of his time on that. Like I said, that doesn't, people listening to your podcast, that sounds pretty standard now, but that thought in the 80s, it's like, man, no way. Student athletes, it was like if I say jump, you say how high, right? Like that's the thing that we heard when we were kids. And now it's involving them in the process, involving them in their future and asking them how they feel every day. And, how do you want to build the workout plan together? We can do this together. And like I said, he was just really ahead of his time on that.
I saw somewhere you said that culture is like the fifth event in gymnastics, and that's a saying that you have. A follow-up to that last question, kind of the reverse. What would you say is the most different between you and your father as a coach?
As a coach member, I was at kind of the end of his career. And from what I hear, he was pretty fiery the first, 10, 15 years. I was with him for the final 6. And, he's just such a peaceful, happy guy. Like he just loved everyone, wanted everyone to be happy and successful. And I'm very much the same way, but I think maybe just because I'm younger right now is like, I think I'm a little more fiery and maybe a little more feisty with the judges than he was. Like sometimes I can get on him pretty hard. Those judges when they're not scoring the way I want him to. He was just, such a laid back, peaceful guy towards the end. I guess that's probably the biggest difference between us, but who knows? Hopefully I'll get there one day too, because I could, being fiery and all this stuff, it's causing me a lot of gray hairs. So hopefully I can mellow out pretty soon.
That's pretty funny. I know, like, if you look back at Maryland gymnastics, obviously you experienced it yourself when you were at Umass with a team getting cut. I know that Maryland gymnastics in your dad's time was, nearly got cut a couple different times. Do you remember that growing up as well and what that was like? Maybe him losing a job?
Yeah, I do remember that as a kid. And, it was really hard times because not that he didn't share it with me or my sister. Obviously he was always protecting us from things like that, but you could just tell he was going through a tough time. And when you run a program the way he does, when you don't have all the things that other people have, in the 80s and 90s here at Maryland, he didn't have the strong budget, he didn't have the facilities that he needed, he didn't have the scholarships. They didn't have scholarships until like 1996. That's really late in the game. He had some. I think he got to full funding in 96. And the only way to keep up with everybody else who has all of the things that they need is to pour your heart and soul into it. And that's what he did. And, to face program cuts or program elimination, I think, 2, maybe even 3 times, you could feel it wearing on him, and I remember him just being down and sad, and it's just how much he loves the program and he loved his student athletes. The thought of it all going away was really hard for him. And like I said, we never felt like we would be in a tough situation financially. Like he always knew he could get another job, but I think he felt more for the student athletes. This was their dream and their journey. Yeah, he could take a buyout or he could go get another job at a university, but the story he told me is he asked the student athletes, he's like, do you guys want me to take the buy or you want me to fight with you? And they're like, we're going to fight. And he's like, all right, let's go. So, he kind of fought with these student athletes and they made a stand and they saved the program. And to this day, several of them, I know the ones that were really integral in kind of standing up for the program. This was after some of the Len Bias stuff in the 80s, and it was a tough time around here. But they come back every year to every home meet. They're lawyers now, which go figure. But yeah, it makes it even more personal to my family that this program has been through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and it's been an honor for my family to go through it together with them.
At a certain point, that also makes a lot of sense, because if those players aren't on scholarship, that means even more they obviously really want to be in the team. They love the culture, so it makes sense that they would want to fight alongside your dad to keep the program alive.
Yeah, that, and gymnastics isn't, especially nowadays you see soccer and lacrosse and field hockey and kids starting that at a young age. But remember, back in the 80s, you started those sports in high school. But gymnastics was the one that you started at 5 years old, 4 years old. So for these athletes, this wasn't like a hobby that they picked up 4 years before they got here, right? Like, they had been doing gymnastics since they were able to walk. So for them, the thought of it going away, it was too much. They said, no, we've got to stand up and fight for us. And I every time they come to meets, I just thank them because of their courage and bravery. There's hundreds of gymnasts who have now come through this program and got to benefit from this university and what it means to be a Maryland gymnast. And they're all out in the world doing great things. We have doctors and lawyers and teachers and politicians. We have everything. And I really, we get alum that come back every year and just thank us and thank my father and thank myself and my assistant coaches of how impactful this program has been on their lives. And for me, and I know for my father, that's the true victory there. Those are the wins that you remember forever. Those are the wins that matter.
You've seen so many changes in your time at Maryland, obviously, at the university, but also in the scope of athletics, as we were talking about earlier with transfer portal. Do you want to take it back to 2014ish when Maryland moved to the ACC? What was the biggest change that kind of happened in your program when that occurred?
Yeah, it's funny. I think back on that time so when I took over as head coach, we were in the ACC. It was also kind of called the Eagle, the East Atlantic Gymnastic League. We were, it was kind of like a dual conference membership. But I think the year before I took over as head coach, I think we'd finished 8th out of 8. And it was we got to work our way up. And by the time the last 4 years in that conference, we were third, second, and we were 2-time conference regular season champions. So we were so excited. We worked our way to the top of the ACC. We were preseason number 1, and it was such an exciting time. And then we announced we were moving to the Big Ten, and being the number 1 team in the Eagle ACC was good enough for, I think, 9th out of 10 in the Big Ten. It's here we go again. You kind of got to start over from the bottom. So that was certainly a challenge. And then coming into such a strong conference where we were only built from a resource standpoint for the ACC, which was not a strong gymnastics league at the time. And we had to really kind of catch up pretty fast. And we're still doing some of that catch up, but now we have 12 teams in the Big Ten, and obviously, some of the most outstanding gymnastics in the country. And then this year, I think we finished the 5th highest ranked Big Ten team in the nation. So, like I said, coming in, leaving the ACC in the top and then entering and starting over again at the bottom, we're making that progress. We still want to work our way up into the top 4 and then top 3 and then 2. And then we want to win a Big Ten championship. But it's been a solid climb. It's been difficult at times, but we are making steady progress.
We've talked a little bit about kind of the changing landscape of college sports. Another big thing that's bound to happen pretty soon is a new revenue share model that's going to be used across college athletics. How do you see that impacting gymnastics? And then I guess also just non-revenue sports as a whole. How do you see that impacting them?
Yeah, I'm excited for it, and I'll tell you why. Well, from a personal standpoint, like we talked about, women's college athletics is in the best place it's ever been, and gymnastics is in the best place it's ever been in this country. So, if this had happened 5-10 years ago, I think we would have more of an uphill battle. But finally, people are catching on to the value that women's college athletics brings. You're seeing it in women's basketball, and you're seeing it in gymnastics. The national championships were on ABC, and the numbers were great again for a second year in a row. So it's a great time for this to come into effect for us. That's one. And then two, for those who are afraid, this is what I would say. Like, if you look at the history of college athletics, there were lots of moments where we were so afraid that this is going to ruin everything, right? This is going to ruin everything. Remember, like, you think back in the 70s, it was like Title IX. Oh, this is going to ruin everything. If we let women do sports, like this will be terrible. Like, well, fast forward to now, turns out it wasn't terrible. And then it was like, well, and now we have to give them scholarships too. Like, there's no way we can afford this. And we did. We found a way and we did it. And now college athletics is booming on both sides. And then I remember even not that long ago, there were all these rules about being able to feed your student athletes. There were literally rules. We weren't allowed to give our student athletes anything but one power bar per day. It was like, those protein bars. You couldn't give them meals, and like it was literally illegal. And again, it was like, this is going to ruin everything. And, some schools will be able to do it and some won't. And you know what? It was fine. And now we feed the student athletes all the time at every school. So for anyone who's concerned about the future of college athletics with this revenue share, we'll figure it out and it's going to be great. And college athletics is going to go on and it's going to be even more exciting than it was in the past. And you know what? The next big change is going to come along after that. And not only are we going to survive, but college athletics is going to do great because it's a great product that people want to see. So don't fear the future, just embrace it and try to, for me, it's try to learn my way in this new world. Every time there's a change like this, I always say you can kind of sit around and complain like that's not how we used to do it, or just get your feet moving and figure out how to work this new world. I need to figure out how to work the portal, how to work the rev share, and how to work the NIL. Like, don't just sit around and hope things go back to the way they were, because they're not going to. That genie is out of the bottle.
Absolutely. Speaking of the future, you have two daughters. Which one of them do you think will be the next head coach?
Oh my gosh. I don't know right now. I think that would be so cool. It's funny because one day they were in the back of the car and I was taking them to practice or school or something. And my oldest was like, Dad, are you going to be the head coach when I go to college? And I was like, Taya, I don't know. And she's like, well, if you are, could I be on the team? And I started to get a little teary eyed, right? And then I look in the rear view at Riley, my youngest. She didn't ask. She didn't ask, because she's probably like, I'm going somewhere else. I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe they can do it together. I'm not gonna fall for that. You guys are trying to get me to pick one daughter over the other, but they're both different. Taya has so much passion and love for the sport. And then Riley has like this just crazy raw ability and strength and power. So I honestly think they would complement each other pretty well. But man, we just finished level 3 state championships 2 weeks ago, which they both did really well. I think finished like 4th and 5th. So it's pretty good in the state. So we're just trying to get them to level 4 next. So we'll start there before we get them ready for coaching.
Well, that's very fair. Safe to say the Nelligan name will be safe in the world of at least the state of Maryland gymnastics. So, Brett, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. And again, thank you for all you do, shedding light on all of our sports here at Maryland. And we just appreciate you guys and keep doing great things. We'll keep listening and we'll keep being fans. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Coach.
All right, take care, guys.
Well, you heard from Coach Nelligan about kind of the generations of Maryland gymnastics. Might stay in the Nelligan family with the coaching job, as Brendan implied. But gymnastics, we're not here to talk about them off top. Let's start with some spring sports. Maryland men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse both getting geared up for postseason play. Brendan, let's do it a little differently for the preview this week. Let's give 3 key elements that you're looking for across both teams. So kind of 3 of the main factors that you think will play a role in both the women's and the men's lacrosse's tournament runs.
All right, let's do it. So it's hard to look at kind of from this point, but the biggest thing that's going to come into play for both teams, we've talked about it all season, is goalkeeping. Logan McNaney played one of his better games this season against Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins has not had a very good season, but as we're talking about, it's a rivalry game. They're going to come out firing. They played Maryland pretty tight. It was a close game. Tied it up at 8-8, and then Maryland obviously scored the next 3 from there to take the 11-8 win. Big win for Maryland. Women's side, JJ Soriano has been playing better. She played very well in last Wednesday's game against Rutgers, where Maryland had that very close 8-7 win. So if JJ Soriano plays stronger as she did against Johns Hopkins, she played not her best game, but around that 500 mark where Kathy Reese, has always said you want to be over that. She was slightly under it. She had 9 saves on 20 shots, so slightly under that mark, but she played very well in the Rutgers game. If she can have numbers around there, that's going to give Maryland a chance to win pretty much every single game. Maryland's going to take on the women's side Rutgers on Wednesday night in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. Those games are in College Park. The entire tournament's hosted in College Park, which is very nice for Maryland. They're going to get that home field advantage. So we'll see what happens there. But the first thing is goalkeeping. The next thing I was alluding to is just the timelines of the games is also a big factor for both teams. The women's tournament will be done this weekend. Wednesday, Maryland will play Wednesday if they win, and then Friday, and then Sunday. So that kind of all depends on if they keep winning. They're on a collision course. They're the number 2 seed. They're on a collision course with Northwestern. And so, you have a pretty good idea of how that will probably end. They've dominated the entire year. So I would expect Northwestern, they're obviously the favorites coming into this tournament. I would expect them to win. But then if you go to the men's side, they're in a completely different aspect kind of on their schedule because they have a lot of time off. They got the 2 seed, which was very important. They're not going to play until May 1st. Not this Thursday, but next Thursday. They'll play the winner of Johns Hopkins and Penn State. Probably going to beat Penn State, but both very solid teams. So the timelines of the teams obviously look very different. And then the third key I will bring is just looking at if Maryland's goal scorers step up and play the way that they've been playing, especially on the women's side. Jordan Lipkin and Corey Edmondson in the past 2 games have carried this team. They're able to do that, but they need a little bit of help. And the same thing kind of goes for the men's side. Braden Nurksa had a great game against Johns Hopkins, scored 4 goals. The 3 of them and the top goal scorers from both sides have been playing very well. They're probably peaking at the right part of the season, but they do need a little bit of assistance, especially if the women's team wants to give Northwestern a run, maybe in the championship game. But Maryland's got to get there to have a chance. So I would expect them to take care of Rutgers, but they did play a very close game. And then on the men's side, likely going to play Penn State, but we'll have to see.
I think that you talked about the stars. I think that balance is key to remember as well. Both teams are 3rd in the Big Ten right now at assists per game in both the men's and women's teams. But then you look at the shots numbers and the total amount of shots. Maryland men's ranks down in the bottom, actually last in the conference in the amount of shots they've taken. And then Maryland women's ranks 5th. So not necessarily getting a lot of shots on goal, opportunities at the net, but when they do, they've been converting. So I think just making sure that you continue to maintain the balance that I think we've seen recently, and then allow, like Brendan said, your stars to kind of keep playing the way they have. Lipkin and Edmondson have been great. Obviously Daniel Kelly's been really good for the men's team, and Urksa, after kind of having an up and down year, really broke out against Hopkins with a big game. So I think that that's one of the huge things to look out for. And then I'll cap it off with the third thing I'm looking for is maintaining the penalties and limiting penalties. Both of these teams are the best in the Big Ten at not committing infractions or fouls. It's a huge part of lacrosse with penalty kills and shorthanded goals. Maryland women's ranks at top of the conference in penalty minutes per game, and the men's team is last in the conference in the amount of, best in conference by only committing 17 penalties. The next closest committed 24. So a huge kind of discrepancy there, I think, between both teams in the Big Ten. So if they're able to continue, in tournament play, avoiding the disastrous plays that lead to shorthanded goals, lead to, free shot opportunities, you're looking at a pretty decent chance that Maryland has. I think you give yourself a chance, to say the least. So that's something that I'm definitely looking out for, and they're going to need to maintain, because both of these teams' offenses aren't exactly, the most high powered.
Yeah, absolutely. These teams both have the talent and also the discipline to win their respective tournaments. I think the women have a slightly harder chance. I think the men have a very good chance. But it's also the way the teams have been playing this year is if the offensive production isn't good, both teams could easily lose their first games. Obviously, the men will play in the semifinal just because they got the bye. But the women could, if they have a slow offensive night like they had against Rutgers, just last week, if they have a repeat of that performance, but JJ Soriano doesn't play as well as she did, they could easily go out in the first round. So these tournaments are going to be exciting to watch. We'll break down the men's a little bit more next week after we know who their matchup will be against in that semifinal game. They don't have the luxury of playing at home. They'll be playing in Michigan for the men's tournament. But that's pretty much all we got on lacrosse. It's going to be an exciting time, and especially having the women's tournament in College Park. Hopefully, get some live eyes on the games this weekend.
Definitely, it'll be a fun one. Let's go to another game that limited people will have eyes on, but there will definitely be more than normal. Let's head to football spring game this weekend. The red and white game. Maryland's one of the only teams, not only, but one of kind of the few teams bucking the trend of either canceling the spring game or not putting it on television. This game will be aired on Big Ten. I mean, I think that everyone kind of knows that this is the public's first chance to see Malik Washington, Justin Martin to a lesser extent, but mostly Malik. I've heard that he's really performed really well. I mean, both of these kids look pretty physically prepared to play college football. Martin's a big guy. Malik looks bigger than I expected. And I've heard that both of them have looked, pretty solid. I mean, obviously this is spring camp. I think that Malik has mentioned that he's still kind of struggling and getting adjusted to coverages, but I think that all signs point to this being pretty tight race that I would not be surprised in the slightest if Washington wins it, just from what I've heard and kind of other reports, obviously. So Malik will have his first chance to show out to the Terp fans on Saturday. Mike, I guess it's hard to really gauge anything from a spring game. In my opinion, I think that it's kind of a glorified scrimmage, and the play calling won't be anything crazy. But I guess if there's one thing that you had to pinpoint from Malik or Justin, what would you be looking for?
Comfortability, and I'm looking at that from Malik. Obviously, again, like you said, this is not the roster Maryland's going to be taking into 2025. Not even close. We're going to know that in May, June time. But how comfortable does Malik Washington look in Loxley's system? Is he making deep throws? Is he running a lot? These are things that are going to be fun to look towards. Same with Justin Martin now. Obviously, last year, MJ Morris was a spring game MVP. He did not end up being the starting quarterback for the Terps last season. However, if Justin Martin looks really good during the spring game and Malik looks like he's still trying to get adapted to the college football landscape, which I don't think is going to happen, that hasn't backed up anything that we've heard in the past so far about Malik, but these are things to be watching out for. I also want to look at the receiver depth. Who are the number one options? Who is Malik throwing to? Who is Justin Martin throwing to? Obviously, you lost a lot of talent last year between Ty Felton, between Caden Prather, between a couple other names. So that's another big thing that I'll be watching.
Yeah, and I would not expect Jaleel Farouk, the Oklahoma transfer, who I would guess is going to be Maryland's number one receiver this year. I don't expect him to play due to injury. So you're looking at a receiver group of Caleb Webb, Tennessee transfer Octavian Smith, Ryan Manning, and Shalik Knotts. It's kind of where you're at right now. I would be stunned.
Not great. Great.
Not great. I'd be stunned if Maryland didn't make another addition in the portal here in the spring. They're already reaching out to some guys, it seems. I'll change it up. I think one thing I'm interested to look at is where the pass rush is going to come from. And it's going to be hard to gauge that in a spring game when the quarterbacks aren't live. You're not allowed to hit, obviously, Malik or Justin. But I think with Kellen Wyatt transferring, with LaVon Johnson leaving, who's expected to play a big role, where is this team getting their pass rush? The lack of returners along the front seven is a little concerning, I think. And there's not a lot of guys who you really pinpoint and say, yes, they're going to be able to push the pocket. They're going to be able to disrupt things. I think that that's something that I would be significantly concerned about if I was a Maryland coach. And I think that, frankly, there's not really, unless somebody has taken a big step forward and we'll get a chance to see. Right now, you look at it, there's not a lot of talent along that defensive line per se. And I'm fascinated, really, really excited to see kind of what that looks like moving forward for Maryland and how they're going to generate pass rushing with a new defensive coordinator. So that's be something I'm watching.
Both the offensive line and defensive line could actually look very good in the spring game, but it's not really for the right reasons. It'd be because the opposing line doesn't really have the talent probably to match up, but that's something that we're definitely going to be watching. Can you guys break down for me something, I've been looking out for is just at least scrolling on Twitter. It seems like a lot more people are leaving the Maryland program this time of year than in previous years. Do you guys have a sense of why that's happening?
That's just the landscape of college sports at this point. Like, I don't think it's a Maryland specific problem. Like, you're seeing this throughout all different teams. Does it help that Maryland is at the bottom of the Big Ten and that their fan base isn't as rabid as other Big Ten fan bases? No, absolutely that hurts them. But I wouldn't zero it as a Loxley problem, a Maryland problem. Like, you have guys saying, "Oh, I love Loxley. Loxley was a big influence in my life." Like, I don't think it has to do with the culture or the program. I think it's more so just the allure of the transfer portal, being able to pick where you want to go, and maybe there's money elsewhere. I think that's kind of the root of the cause.
I do think there's a significant concern that these losses are coming mostly along the line of scrimmage. I mean, you had multiple talented young offensive linemen depart, and Mike is right in the sense that there's not as many players, or there is a lot of players leaving constantly. We know about the reshuffling, but it is a bit unique to see this happening along the offensive and defensive line. And I think that that's probably the main concern moving forward in terms of what you're looking at, because Loxley has preached the entire time that the line of scrimmage is the biggest reason why Maryland hasn't been able to win those big games, and development is how they're going to do that. When you're losing guys before they even develop into who you want them to be, it's tough. And I don't really know why that has happened along the lines, but it has. And now I think it's up to Maryland to find some replacements. Just to point out, I mean, I know I talked about it earlier, but Maryland's top 4 pressure getters from last season, Tommy Ekin, I always forget how to pronounce his last name, Aking Basote, Jordan Phillips, Quayshawn Fuller, Kellen Wyatt, all not on the 2025 roster.
I mean, kind of what you just said, it's so odd. It's something that, you never could have envisioned many years ago, where a player transfers in December and they leave in April before they ever play a snap, even make a roster, really. It's just such an odd thing to have happen. I know, Sam, you've talked about this a little bit, but I want to get your take now. Obviously, the roster that is going to be seen on spring game is not the roster we're going to see on the first game in late August. But given what Maryland has right now, where would you rank this roster compared to the other, 3 teams that, we've covered at Maryland?
The worst. I think that this is the worst.
I agree. I'm not sure it's particularly close.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are promising pieces. Malik, it really excites me. I like Jaleel Farouk a lot. I like kind of some of the young corners that they've got, but just the overall depth of talent, I think, is pretty unquestionably the weakest it's been since I've arrived on campus. And I don't really know how they're going to fix that for the upcoming year, no matter how many portal additions you make. There's a reason the guys who are entering the portal are doing it, in April. And they're looking for NIL money, which Maryland doesn't have a lot of, or they're leaving their school because their school didn't want them. And that's kind of, I think, where we're at this point.
It's also
looking for a bigger role, I guess I should say.
Yeah, but a lot of people who have left in the past couple of weeks are decently big names. Kellen Wyatt, obviously, like people who we would have thought would make an impact on the next team or on this year's team are now gone.
That's NIL based. I mean, here's what I mean. Listen, Therese Davis can say it's not money, and Kellen Wyatt can say other things, but there's, like you said, B, there's not many other reasons why some of these guys wouldn't have entered the portal. And I think a lot of that is NIL based. Maybe some of it has to do with other things. I'm not going to say I know every guy's decision, but logistically, it only makes sense that a lot of it would be NIL backed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm excited for the conversations of what if we put Malik Washington on the 2022 team, how would they have done? So those will obviously come way down the line. But for now, we'll talk next week and recap what we saw in that game. But for now, it's just exciting times to know that Maryland football is playing a game this week. Let's transfer now over to baseball. They played a game on Tuesday night. Mike, you were there. You also covered the weekend series. And I heard some people lost some hair over this. What's been going on in the baseball world?
Yeah, so let's start with Friday. I know Sam was watching this one with me too. Kyle McCoy, another really strong start for him. Maryland was ahead 6-1 in the eighth inning when he exited. It looked like he was going to be able to pitch the full eighth. Didn't really have the same command that he was having earlier on, so they pulled him in the middle of the eighth. And then Maryland proceeds to give up their lead that inning, and they exit the frame. One's ahead by 5, then tied at 6. And then, of course, as it's gone the past season, don't score the next frame, and they lose when Indiana scores a go-ahead run in the ninth. So that's really how it's gone for Maryland. Matt Swope told me today, post-game, he shaved his head. He wanted to exercise some of the demons. Because like I said, that is a game script that we've seen before. And what happened next in the weekend series, we've seen a lot too, where Maryland comes out on Saturday, run rules their opponent, amazing offensive game, and then they come out flat in the Sunday rubber match, and then they lose the series. So that's something that Matt Swope wants to change, does not want to see. He did bring up, if they win that Friday game, everybody calls it a great weekend. They're 3-1, won their first conference series, but instead they blow the game Friday. Everybody looks at the 2-2 week in the series loss differently. I mean, that's just how it goes. I know it's frustrating as a coach to see that be the narrative, but when you're not pulling out the games like that, that's just what's going to happen. They did have a run rule win today against Towson, 11-1. I'm not going to talk about that much because Towson's a pretty bad team. Maryland's expected to win those games. But looking forward to this weekend, they have Nebraska coming to College Park. This is pretty big for them. Nebraska, Minnesota, Rutgers, they're all tied for the final 12th spot in the Big Ten tournament right now. Maryland faces all three in their final 4 series of the season. So this is starting a really pivotal stretch for them if they want to make a run and get into the postseason, because I know you guys might disagree with it, but if they make the Big Ten tournament, anything's possible. Penn State last year snuck in, made it to the championship game. Anything's possible if they make it to the tournament.
I'm actually going to give Mike some love. That's what my game of the week is this week. Maryland, Nebraska, the series. I think that this game has a lot of Big Ten tournament implications, as gross as that sounds, considering both teams are well under 500. Nebraska's a couple spots ahead of Maryland. If Maryland is somehow, some way, we don't know if it's possible, avoid using their bullpen and take a couple games from the Cornhuskers, they could vault themselves right back into contention for a tournament spot, which at that point, as Michael did say, people do win the lottery. Squirrels eventually do find nuts if they're blind. Maryland baseball could theoretically win the Big Ten championship. So that's my game/series of the week, is Maryland, Nebraska, in a battle between the Big Ten's bottom for baseball. But I think it should be a fun series. I mean, both offenses really good. Historically, Nebraska has a really good fan base. I'm excited to see the highlights and read Mike's recaps. So, fun series ahead.
Are we picking that series?
Let's do it.
All right.
I can start us off.
I want to hear me and Brennan's prediction and have Mike kind of go off.
Yeah, let's do that. I just think if you look at the Indiana game, you show that to someone who knows nothing about Maryland baseball. You show them that weekend series. That's really all you need to show them, because that is pretty much perfectly summed up this season of Maryland baseball. Good enough to win, have a chance, can't get it done. The Nebraska series is interesting. I think Maryland does what they have traditionally done, pretty much the same story we've seen the past couple of weeks. I think they lose that Friday game. I think Saturday is an absolute blowout. And then it's going to come down to Sunday again. And, it's so funny. A year and a half ago, we were talking about how Maryland hadn't lost a Big Ten series in a year. They had that super long streak. And now it's the complete opposite. And they haven't shown me anything this year that gives me a ton of confidence to say they will get a series win done. So I'll take Nebraska winning Friday, Sunday.
I'll take Nebraska. I'll say they win Friday, Saturday. Maryland pulls out a win on Sunday.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to pick the Dirty Terps. I think this is the weekend that they finally get that conference series win. Not only just conference series, just series as a whole this year. They have not won a single weekend set against a singular opponent. I know Kyle's been pitching good on Fridays. The bullpen's not going to really be needed that game. You just got to put the right guy in. I think Kyle's going to give a good start. I think Christopher Cespedes, if that's who it is they're bringing out after him, I think he's going to have a good appearance. I could see them winning the Saturday game too. Joey McManus had a really good start last week, and that run rule win. I'm taking the series win for the Terps.
Joey McManus is like a hydra. Like every time we talk about him, we think his career's dead. Like, oh, they put him as a starter. They moved him in. Now he gave up 27 runs in the start. Now he's in the closer role and he's looking good. But oh wait, now he's blown 2 straight, so he's back to being a middle reliever, and now he's a starter again. I mean, credit to the guy.
It's been a tough year for him. A little insight for Joey. So they found him and pitching coach Jimmy Jackson. They found that his arm angle that he was releasing at this year was a lot lower than it was at last year. So they've been working as the season's kind of progressed on raising that arm angle, making him feel a little bit more comfortable, having the delivery be where it was at, where he had a pretty successful freshman year that had us to the point of saying, hey, this is going to be a really good option as a sophomore this year. Like we were looking at him as possibly a second ace next to Kyle McCoy. Now, obviously that's not how it's been, and there's been a lot of up and down appearances, but everybody's trying. It's not like they've thrown their hat and they're like, this season's over. Hey. Everybody is still trying still. I mean, it's easier said than done. I mean, the women's soccer team gave up mid-season. So, I mean,
what a stray that the women's soccer.
I'm just saying.
Like, I mean, he has a point. They did eliminate their coach.
Like, it sounds crazy for me to say they're all trying, but like this team is trying. Like they're not giving up.
They're trying. Let give it to them for that, for sure. I mean, you got to give.
I want an on-3 graphic that just says "trying" and then it's just Mike's face.
You got to give Joey McManus credit. I mean,
3
appearances the last 2 weeks. He's given up 8 runs in 10 innings. So we're making strides.
What did he do on Saturday?
He pitched 5 innings, 2 runs, 3 hits.
I saw him.
Yeah, not bad from Joey. So, anyway, moving off of baseball, as we always talk way too long about them. On to softball, real quick. They have a bye week, 2 series left. We're talking, feels like in circles about softball, and I don't really think that there's another circle we can run around. So, no more combo on Lauren Karn's team. They're gonna probably end their season at the bottom of the Big Ten again. And yeah, on to basketball. Some quick news. Elijah Saunders commits. Nice forward. We talked about that last week. Nothing really out. Interestingly, I think every news outlet that covers Maryland has put in a FOIA to get Buzz Williams' contract. Nobody's heard back from what I can tell.
But you guys believe he's under contract, right?
I mean, he does have a tendency to leave spots early.
Maryland doesn't have an athletic director too, so I mean, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Interesting stuff there. I mean, Brendan's right. I'm sure he's under contract, and they're probably just working out some details and kinks. But we'll have to see what those details are when they do release it. That's about it from Terps recaps. Brendan can take it out with Terrific Terp.
I'll grab one more thing before we slide out. Women's basketball probably had the only real basketball news. Obviously, I jokingly said at the top of the show that Julian Reese entered the transfer portal. He did, but so is everybody with no eligibility. Ian Martinez also entered the transfer portal. It's just, if you saw that and you were confused, it was just basically there's a chance they could get some extra eligibility in a certain house settlement, but it seems very unlikely, but that's likely why they're all doing it. The biggest news was women's basketball. Ali Kubek entered the transfer portal kind of in the, later moments. It's only open, I believe, for another day. So it's a pretty surprising move anytime someone enters the transfer portal this late, but you have to kind of think it has something to do with Gracie Merkel joining the team, probably going to fill a similar role. A different player. It would have been interesting to see both of them on the court together. I assume Brenda Fries was still scoping around and will bring somebody else in, but that's a big loss for Maryland. And I think before this, their roster was probably a preseason top 5-10 team in the country.
I think that, I heard that it was just on Twitter. I saw on Twitter that it was maybe major related. So that's just something to think about. I don't know if that's actually the case or not, but maybe
she's a student. People forget that.
People do forget, and I don't know if Allie has necessarily a WNBA career, so maybe she's just looking for something that has her master's. That's why some other players in the past have transferred, I know, out of Maryland, so I wouldn't be shocked. But yeah, that definitely was a blow to Maryland. But I think that they have enough talent in the front court. Like Brianna Williams, I liked a lot as a freshman. If she can play a solid backup role, they got a good squad. They got a really, really nice rotation right now. So that's fun. Sorry about women's basketball. Totally forgot about that. They also added a Virginia transfer as well.
This is a good point. Yes.
Duke transfer. My apologies.
Duke transfer. Yeah.
I'm totally going to butcher the name, so I'm very sorry about it.
It's ACC six Woman of the Year, though. A very solid addition.
Oluchi Okinawa. She was ACC Sixth Woman of the Year, as Brendan said. She also won the ACC tournament Most Valuable Player, averaged almost 17 points a game during that tournament. Really nice forward addition, and I think that they've now stacked up some nice wings. I mean, you think about the wings they have next year: Kayleen Schmeichel, Oluchi, Bree McDaniel, Yarden Garzone. That's a pretty stacked crew. If they can just figure out the point guard position, guys, they're my early candidates to be the best team on campus next year.
Mir McLean, I assume, is also coming back, so that's another piece. Like this roster is really, really, really good.
We talk about it every year with like, oh, they have a lot of depth, but like it feels like they have like a lot of cohesive depth, and that makes sense. Like the pieces fit. If the point guard spot is really just, that's a huge turning point. And either Kendall Walker or the transfer from Slovenia is going to have to step up, because if that doesn't hit, ooh.
Sarate Biasu on the next year's team would be would do some numbers.
She needs the 8th year of eligibility.
Hey, maybe she'll enter the transfer portal like everybody else has.
All right, Brendan, take us away with Terrific Terp.
Let's do it. The history and idea of success in Maryland football world would not be complete without this week's Terrific Terp, Bernard Filoni. He's better known as Bernie, and he was born in Pennsylvania in 1932. When he came to College Park, he had immense success at the quarterback position, so much so that he finished 4th in the 1935 Heisman vote. It's not so often we hear the word Heisman and Maryland football in the same sentence, but for Bernie, that was actually the case. He led the Terps to a Sugar Bowl appearance in 1952 and an NCAA title in 1953. Rather, a national championship in 1953. He was an All-American and ACC Player of the Year as well. He also played baseball at Maryland, but football was his true calling. In 1954, he was drafted into the NFL by the San Francisco 49ers and offered $9,000 to play defensive back there. But the Edmonton Eskimos offered him more money to play quarterback in the Western Interprovincial Football Union. He led the Eskimos to a 1954 Grey Cup win. However, his play was stopped because he had to serve in the U.S. Army, which he did for the next few years. After that, he joined the Hamilton Tiger Cats, where Talia Tagovailoa played this past season, and he won 2 more Grey Cups over the next 8 years there. He was named to the Canada Sports Hall of Fame in 1999, and his number 10 jersey was retired by the Tiger Cats. His success at Maryland and in Canada in the football world make Bernard Filoni this week's Terrific Terp.
Good stuff from Brendan. Good stuff from Under the Shell. You can find all of our stuff everywhere you get your podcasts, socials, and anywhere else. So appreciate you always for listening. We'll be back next week. Have a good rest of your evening.
Guess what? You've got Under the Shell podcast. Nobody does it better.